Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of the African Leadership Center Seminar Series, the 9th in the series. And it's a monthly seminar series that the African Leadership Center runs, which brings together affiliates and fellows of the African Leadership Center to speak about their research and programs that are of interest and relate to peace, security, leadership, and society. Today, we are fortunate to have Dr. Wanjiru to speak to us about a very interesting research she and her colleagues have done in Kenya. And it's titled Owners versus Beholders, Social Capital and Sustainability of Water Supply Projects in Nairobi City's Informal Settlements. This promises to be interesting because there are so many interconnections and cross-cutting issues that are of interest to gender, to peace, to security, to populations, and society in general. So just a little bit about Dr. Wanjiru. She's a research fellow at the African Leadership Center. She's part of the research department and is responsible for contributing to the ALC's research output, research programs, coordination, and organizational resource mobilization. Wanjiru finished her PhD in project management at Kenyatta University and holds an MBA in project management from the same university, as well as a BSc in international business administration finance option from the United States International University, Africa. She has worked as a lecturer at the Department of Management Science, Kenyatta University, and a research assistant in several consultancy projects under the Darbeck Research in Kenya. Wanjiru is a certified project management professional, and her research interests are project sustainability, leadership, knowledge management, and development in Africa. That should already speak to how interesting this topic is going to be. She would have about 15 to 20 minutes to speak, after which another scholar called Vivian Nsia would respond to the presentation. Now, Vivian is a PhD candidate at the University of Leeds. She researches on dominant water governance narratives and women participation in Northern Ghana. She's generally interested in natural resources, governance, gender, migration, community development researches, among other things. Now, these two will provide us with very insightful talking points that will be thought-provoking and will keep us thinking. I would love to encourage you to keep your questions at bay and have them at hand and ask them. You can type them into the chat box when you have them, or when they finish the presentation, please do raise your hand and I will give you a chance to speak. Without much ado, I would like to invite Wanjiru to proceed with the presentation. And it's going to be quite interesting. And as a reminder, it's on social capital and sustainability of water supply projects in Nairobi's informal settlements. So Wanjiru, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Clement. I'm grateful for the invitation to be part of this month's seminar. Sorry, I am trying to share my screen and to go to presentation mode. Sorry, I hope that is clear. As Clement has introduced me, I work as a research fellow at the ALC Nairobi office. And today I will be sharing on a topic, a paper that I've dubbed Owners versus Beholders, Social Capital and the Sustainability of Water Supply Projects in Nairobi City's Informal Settlements. As a disclaimer, before I begin this paper is part of a broader study, which was my thesis research. So today I'm presenting just one part. So in the event it might look so narrow, just know that it was in a bigger context. And this is not the only, sort of factor that I looked at then. Just to begin, a brief background. In line with SDG 6, to ensure access to water and sanitation for all, there has been a lot of activity, and initiatives, interventions that are directed at providing water supply and clean water to communities around the world. But because of climatic issues and anthropogenic factors, this still continues to be a problem in terms of the safety, reliability, and sustainability of water. Globally, the UN has provided us with statistics that 1 in 3 people do not have access to clean water, and this problem becomes quite pronounced in urban areas. For instance, where they face the challenges of rapid urbanization, there's also the issue of rural-urban migration, and therefore there's a lot of sporadic water supply, and especially in contexts where there are weak public systems. So data is also showing us that in Africa, the urban population is set to grow. From 2000 to 2015, it went up with over 100 million, and by the year 2050, it's projected to go up to around 950 million. So this again brings out the importance of why we need to tackle issues around water. Another thing also in the background, as I've said, in urban context, and especially in countries like Kenya and in Africa, where there are weak public institutions, these infrastructure services are not able to meet the needs of the burgeoning populations. And in Kenya currently, urban water coverage stands at 59%. This is in the bigger urban areas, but in the informal settlement areas, they still underserving with regards to water supply. And because of this, and because the current special systems do not facilitate piping and those kinds of mechanisms, the stakeholders decided to institute water kiosks, to establish water kiosks, communal yard taps in shared community land, where members of those informal spaces or informal settlement spaces, what we call here slums, can access water from common water points. However, even in spite of building these water kiosks, 25% of these projects fail within the first 2 years of inauguration. And at any one time, when you go to the ground, there are about 30 to 60% of the plants not functioning. So this is what made me, question, what is it that affects the sustainability of this water supply project? What are the issues? What are the factors that we need to interrogate? Because again, water is a linchpin of development in very many other sectors. We talk about health, we talk about education, we talk about the general, manufacturing economy. Water is the driver of development. So why then are we failing in terms of sustaining water supply? So among the items that I had chosen to study for my PhD, I also looked at the issue of inclusiveness, and that's why I narrowed down to this paper on the issue of social capital. In the Nairobi informal settlement space, we have seen that there is an implicit discrimination of people who live in the slums, allow me to use that word, of people who live in the slums by the National Water Policy, and this was admitted by the Water Sector Regulatory Board, WASREB, in their 2018 report, where they say that the water policy has not been able to meet the specific needs of those communities. So even going beyond the reform, there are other issues that need to be handled, especially to do with this inclusiveness, to ensure that there is constant water supply in those communities. And with that, I went to the issue of inclusiveness. What are those social aspects of water management and sustainability that need to be addressed so that we can achieve sustainability? And this has come out because a lot of times we focus on first order scarcity. We are told by the UN, we are told by UNEP, we are told by UN Habitat and all these other bodies dealing with forestry and water resources that water is scarce in itself. But there's also another level of scarcity, a second order scarcity, where the social tools and resources that are required to enable communities to adapt to first order scarcity are not harnessed adequately. So these social factors include social capital or social relations, and they have been found through research to support adaptive responses to resource fluctuations, shocks, and other eventualities. So where does this social capital exist? It exists within the local, communities, and the question of local, the question of communities has been broadly discussed, even in management. I am from the management field, and here we looked at inclusiveness from the aspect of stakeholder theory, posited by Edward Freeman in 1984. But since I'm working at the ALC now, I've come to learn of other theories and other concepts that focus on inclusiveness, like the local turn, which I borrowed from peace building, which focuses or on centering local communities as the primary drivers of transformative sustainable interventions. So currently there's no agreement on what the local really is. So you can look at it in a territorial sense where it's a particular geographical area, but also you can look at it in a deterritorial sense where it is about the social capital and network. So for my study, I looked at it in the territorial, which is the slums, the informal settlement areas, and also now went forward to look at what are the networks in these spaces. And as we look at also the issue of social capital and the issue of local, these communities, something that piqued my interest in my reading was the need to distinguish who are the real owners of an initiative, who are the real owners of this problem, who are the real owners of this intervention. And this was informed by a literature review I did looking at a paper written by Professor Olonishakin in 2020. It was more oriented towards peace building, but I found this quite insightful in terms of delineating who are the real owners of an intervention, so that when we talk about the local, we know who we are going to be talking to and who we are going to be reaching. So Olonishakin provided 4 points that can help us distinguish or delineate who the owners are. And she says that these are the individuals who have lived through a particular hardship situation and were impacted in clear ways. And then they had little other option to live under the difficult environment under consideration. They were direct participants or recipients in identifiable development efforts and have been impacted in tangible ways by those interventions to be able to offer some evidence about what has worked and not worked for them and from what sources. So I looked at this, I borrowed this from the peace framework and looked at it in the water supply space in the slums and asked myself, who are these people who are going through this challenge of lack of constant or clean water supply? Do they have options? Are there interventions that they are participating in or interventions that are targeting them? And that is what prompted me now to ask my research questions. Are these real owners involved in the implementation of the water supply projects? To what extent have they been involved? And what are the benefits that accrue to involving the real owners? The research methodology, as I've said, this was part of a broader study, and the study adopted the explanatory non-experimental research design and used a cross-sectional survey to complete the study. The unit of analysis was 741 projects implemented by the Nairobi City Water and Sewerage Company in the informal settlement areas in Nairobi, the capital city, between June 2016 and June 2018. From this 741 through stratified random sampling, I identified a sample of 260, but in the end, only 194 respondents participated in the study. I collected data through a self-administered semi-structured survey and quantitative analysis. Quantitative data was analyzed through descriptive and inferential statistics. That was regression, and there was data that was also collected from open-ended questions, which was analyzed through content analysis. So what did I find out at the end of the day? That yes, in answering the first question, I found out that these owners have been involved in this project. And the question was now, to what extent have these owners been involved? And many times I found that it was mainly the community leaders that were engaged in things like governance and managing the water kiosks themselves. They were offered training in terms of how do they run, how do they keep their facilities clean, because again, of issues of hygiene and considering the high populations in those areas. So there's some bit of training that goes on there, and there's also the issue of allocation of responsibilities. They have a tiered approach to management. So that approach to management has community health workers, it has community leaders, it has members from the Nairobi City Water Company. So in some spaces, you find representatives from the communities involved. So as an initial step, the project implementers, that is the Nairobi Water Company, have recognized the need for involving community members. But at the same time, despite these people participating, even at the time of the study, 29% of the projects were not in operation. Around 214 of those 741 projects that I set out to study, 29%, that is 29% were not even in operation. So that prompted me to further evaluate. So why do we involve these people? How and what are the benefits of involving people? So with respect to enhancing sustainability, social capital was found to have a few benefits. So in the informal settlement space, a lot of these people don't come in with any other form of capital because donors are coming in with financial capital, they're coming in with technical expertise and so on and so forth. So on the ground, a lot of times because of the constraints in resources, and the kind of communities that are living there, the level of capabilities there, social capital is the one that is most prominent. That is what they bring to the table. And the first one is the issue of information. The first form is information. They have a lot of information that is available on the ground, and looking at the organization like the Water Services Regulatory Board that says their policy does not address the needs, they can leverage this networks, this social capital to access information to find out what are the needs. The other aspect I found to be very glaring in terms of social capital was influence. There are a lot of mobilizers, there are a lot of leaders in those spaces, and influence here has been found to mobilize and motivate individuals to work towards a common goal. And in this case, it is sustaining those water supply projects. And lastly, another aspect of social capital that I found was the social solidarity. So this is the mutual trust, this is the commitment and cohesion that I found to be existing in those communities, whereby people are willing to collectively share the risks and accept the resulting distributional outcomes in the interventions that are implemented there. So leveraging social capital and its benefits will indeed go a long way in addressing the challenges that are facing water supply projects in this context. And another quality of social capital that I found is that it is translatable, it can be grown. So as much as, yes, we are looking at it from that small context of the informal settlements, even only in Nairobi area, it can be replicated and scaled and picked up in broader spaces, because we don't have informal settlements only in Nairobi. There are other pockets in the major towns within the country. So that is also another aspect. How do we scale and replicate this outcome that have been realized in the slum area to other places? In conclusion, I'm trying to rush and keep your time, Clement, sorry. In conclusion, defining sustainability as long-lasting change needs us to come out from the top-down mentality and engage bottom-up approaches. And that's why we now look at the local, we now look at communities, but beyond this romanticizing of the local, we wanted to find out why is it necessary to engage them. We talked about they get buy-in, they promote sustainability, but what else? And this is what the study sought to find out. What are they bringing to the table? That is the information, the influence, and the social solidarity. And once we leverage that, social capital becomes the vehicle on which the external and top-down assistance rides to achieve sustainability. And finally, even as we think about social capital, social networks, we need to also look at the breadth and the depth of these networks. I did not look at that, and probably that is something to look at in further studies or further engagements. What is the breadth? How many people are in this network? What is the depth? What is the quality and the richness of expertise in these networks, even in these informal spaces? And thereby, this will inform their ability to transition from, the micro to the macro, the transmittability that we are talking about. With that, I will end my presentation here and request Vivian to pick it up. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wanjiru. That's a breathtaking presentation that touches on quite a number of things around water governance, what women bring onto the table. Social capital, you said, is a vehicle for achieving a lot in that space there. But I wouldn't go into the discussions because that's what Vivian is here to do. Dr. Vivian, doctor in the making. Vivian, do you want to respond to the presentation now?
Yeah, I would want to share some few insights on the presentation. Please, I hope you can all hear me.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, so I really like the presentation and the fact that she's bringing out issues on social capital, how local influences can affect sustainability of projects. Of course, one of the major challenges we have in Africa here is about sustainability of projects, where projects are implemented in the top-down approach and they become white elephants because local people were not involved and so forth and so on. And to see that Dr. Wanju is also trying to highlight how social capital, please, can you still hear me?
We can hear you, Vivian.
Okay, fine. So to see how Dr. Wanju is trying to highlight how social capital, the connection within local communities, the relationships and how these things become power breakers or how these things become important tools for sustaining projects is very important. But these were the challenges I had with the presentation. I don't know if it's right to go ahead with that. I think Dr. Wanju indicated she used the quantitative approach. Yes, so I was, of course, I really like the fact that you used the quantitative approach and you were able to have a large scale project, a lot of projects. This would have been difficult in using a qualitative approach. But then I would have wanted to know the insights and the perspectives of the local people with respect to how social capital inform their relationship and other factors. And also the fact that you indicated that one social capital or bottom-down approach is used will sustain projects is somehow debatable. The reason why it is debatable is that there are local power dynamics that if you don't critically assess, you will give power or you will make the project a bottom-up approach and you realize that there will be local hijackers. These people will hijack the project and at the end of the day, you realize that you are virtually transferring the power dynamics from the top down to the bottom up. So this is what I mean by that. There are some communities, when you go there are some people who are very influential and powerful than others. These are in the informal settlements you are talking about. For example, in Ghana, we have a lot of Zongo communities. You go there, we have Zongo chiefs, we have children of the chiefs. These are people who are somehow connected to the chief. They have power, the kinship dynamics. There are people who are market queens, market kings, and all these dynamics. So you realize that when you go into the community and you do not assess critically the power dynamics within the community, you realize you'll be creating the same bureaucracy you are trying to avoid with the bottom end, with the top-down approach. So assessing power is very important. Of course, it is a big project and you couldn't touch on all those areas you touch on the project. So I can't know whether you dealt with power, but I want to draw your attention that outlining the power dynamics within the context of every community is very critical in sustaining projects. So not just changing the top-down approach to the bottom-up will solve the sustainability challenges we have in most projects, but also critically assessing the power dynamics because social capital is informed by power. For instance, if I'm a chief and I invite people, there is a likelihood so many people will come around. For example, if it is a water project. In the same way, if I am a chief and I appoint somebody as water governance committee head, there is a likelihood so many people will take whoever I am bringing on board, whether the person is good, has knowledge or whatsoever. So if you don't assess some of these dynamics and correct the excesses, you realize that you'll be replicating the same insustainability issues we have at the local background. And also, I wanted to listen more about how social capital, how the communities use the social capital to assess water and all those issues. But then, of course, you highlighted other issues that are important, and we had only 15 minutes, so I knew you couldn't. But maybe next time, or if you want to advance the project more, I will want to understand, or I want to see how you can connect how the communities, they use social capital. For example, how they have instituted local network or local support systems that you feel could be used to sustain projects. For example, in Ghana here, there are so many rural communities where people used to help their fellows on their farms, and in the next day or in the next farming season, everybody will go to another person's farm to help. So it's like a rotation. Today I help Dr. Wanjiru, the next time Dr. Wanjiru and myself help Dr. Sifa Ansa, Dr. Sifenya Akon, and that rotation goes on like that. So if you have a community that has this type, use that social capital to sustain projects. But there are some communities, you go there, you realize that this social capital is not there. So if you talk about flipping the top down to the bottom up, you realize that you are rather going to create competitions and other stuff. And also this is another area I want to touch, especially in relation to the power dynamics. In some communities, you realize that there is a clash between the traditional political leaders, for example, the chief, the kings, and other stuff, and between them and also the modern political leaders. I don't know the system in Nairobi so far as that is concerned, but in Ghana here, we have the DC, that is the district chief executives, the assemblyman, and the others. These are people who are competing for power because of the changing hands due to colonization. So if you go to such community and you don't do critical stakeholder analysis and you dump responsibility of bottom up to the communities, you realize that competition will not allow the project to go on. And of course, there is also one dynamic that is very important in social capital. Social capital cannot work when people do not have the skills. For example, we want to help, the project is there, we want the project to sustain. For example, we don't have a water in this community, and that is affecting domestic uses of water. It is affecting agricultural uses of water and also industrial uses of water. We wish we could help in a way to sustain our dam project that has been supplied, whether by the government or by an external body, but we don't have the skill. When we don't have the skill, the maintenance capacity, then it means social capital will not be working. So I think these are the few insights I have, but the most important one I want to highlight is the local people's perception about all these social capital and the dynamics so far as sustainability is concerned, because sustainability is critically context specific. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing, Vivian. Very excellent response there. And I'm sure Wanjiru would want to respond to a few of those points. But I mean, very important point there about thinking about flipping the coin, because merely changing the people sitting around the table does not often douse the power indifference between power brokers within communities, because in the communities themselves, there are competing interests that often can be disruptive rather than constructive of development. But I mean, I think I would rather allow Wanjiru to speak to the responses from Vivian. Do you want to do that, Wanjiru?
Yes, thank you, Clement, and thank you so much, Vivian, for the comments, quite rich, quite insightful. And I'll begin by saying, as I mentioned earlier, it was part of a broader study. Yes, there was the quantitative aspect, and there was also the qualitative. Much of what we do here in Nairobi, a lot of our departments really focus on the quantitative, but I used a semi-structured survey. And beginning with your issue of local power dynamics, local hijackers, I like what you call them. It came out, I couldn't bring it out here, what they call them on the ground, water cartels. So on the ground, yes, you have interventions, but they're cartels. There are people who actually run the systems, and it's quite a challenge. There are those power plays that have come out on the ground, and people are trying now to be innovative around it. How do we prevent so-and-so's friend? You know, yes, water has been directed to this kiosk because the water is provided by the national government, directed to a particular kiosk through pipes. But there are people who interject and, you know, divert the water to their own household or to their own outside their houses, and they sell from there. So, and the local government or the local police is not touching them, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of these issues, a lot of power dynamics, and I like that you have challenged us to sort of do a deeper assessment on who these are, what are the power plays in that space. And I think that is what will come forth out of this research, because for me, I ended up finding out these are the water cartels. These are some of the ways to go around the water cartels. But I think I take up the challenge in future studies as I proceed with this topic to be more interrogative with respect to that. How communities use social capital. Are there local support systems? Yes, there are a lot of groups, small groups. The most prominent groups in Kenya are usually women groups. And again, women, why? Because, you know, women are the ones who bear the bigger burden when there are issues of water supply. We are the primary caregivers, we're the ones who are cooking, we're the ones who are doing all those things. So women groups are the ones that are very much involved, even in running this project. So women here in Kenya, it started mainly as a financial table banking thing, chamas, where women would get into a group and contribute money and do a merry-go-round sort of things. But now they even go into projects. So that is the transition that is happening, such that, yes, Nairobi Water wants to establish a water kiosk here, and this women group decides it will take the ownership, it will be managing, you know, it will be liaising with the Nairobi Water Company and following up, liaising with the public health officials that come by once in a while to check on that, the auditors that come to the ground, M&E people. So there's that. There are those self-help groups as well for the broader communities, a lot of self-help groups, especially in the informal settlement space. And because it's a really heterogeneous space, we don't have one tribe, we have so many tribes in there. So the groups are not demarcated really by tribe. So many of them are just a mix of all or many ethnic groups together into that. So some are men's groups, some are women's groups. Women's groups are the ones that I found to be the most prominent, that are now, you know, participating in those systems, that are now even volunteering to go for training and so on and so forth. And yes, the conflict between the traditional political leaders or the community leaders themselves in those spaces, and, you know, the member of county assembly here in Kenya, we call them the members of county assemblies who are on the ground, the chiefs who are on the ground representing government. There are a lot of tensions around that, especially because these projects are done on communal land. And, you know, which side or which village, they call themselves villages now in the informal settlement areas, which village is now contributing land. So now that we have contributed land, which is our right, or what are our rights, and there's a lot of tensions with that. So we've seen that. I was not able to explore all this in totality, but thank you for bringing them out. And the aspect of skills, yes, the locals that were my respondents said that yes, they are offered some training, some bit of training, but there's also a lot of power play when it comes to who is receiving that training, in terms of opportunities, in terms of per diems and incentives. So you find most of the time, yes, training is being done, donors come in and provide money for training to be done, but who receives the training is also another issue, such that now the wrong people receive the training, they're never even in the ones running the kiosks, and in the end, the kiosks now become unsustainable because the people who should have received the financial management or the hygiene and whatnot kind of training are not the ones who actually went to the training session. So that is it. I don't know whether there's something I've left out again.
There was something about capturing local perspectives, which Vivian thought was a very important point. And I'm sure it probably was part of the focus of the study anyway, but if you just want to say something about that.
I hope I understand it correctly. The perceptions of the local people with regards to social capital.
Of course.
This was
and how that can support water. Yeah.
Pardon? Sorry, please repeat that.
Okay. So I was adding up to and how that can inform sustainability of water projects, water supply projects. Yeah.
Okay. So the issue of social capital, again, is quite an interesting thing, because when you go to a space like this, you can't even bring up words like social capital. In the informal settlement space, the kind of people I was interacting with, the kind of people I was engaging with, we had to take the question through so many corners to make it a bit more simplified in terms of, are you involved? How are you involved? Do you have roles and responsibilities in the framework of managing this particular plans, or are you given training, or what do these people do for you? How do you handle these kinds of things? So there was that. People know, yes, they're able to bring something to the table. They know that, yes, we can be able to drive these projects, we can run these projects. Sometimes they say even Nairobi Water does not run them as well as we could, because we understand the needs of the ground. We are here 24/7. We are able to even provide security for ourselves, because when Nairobi Water comes in, sometimes they even chased out of the communities. Some they are asked to pay. Most of the officials don't necessarily even go deep into the slum. So they recognize, yes, we have the capacity, we have the capabilities, we know that we could run this. They're open to this. They know they have the information, they have the time, as well to run this. So yes, they recognize the various aspects of social capital that I was able, to bring out, to highlight in terms of the ways in which they're included. And they recognize that, things like training, like capacity building will be crucial, because, like, for instance, these water kiosks come in built with technologies from, say, Germany, and training is necessary, for these people, so that they can be able to operate them. A lot of them are operated through mobile money and all that. So there's an issue of financial management and so on. So they recognize that, yes, we are able to run. Yes, we need the training. We need this kind of training. Actually, they would tell us, this is the kind of training we want. These people come and train us sometimes how to use the machines. We can press buttons we want, but we also want to know how to manage the monies that we collect. So yes, they're very open, they're very willing to engage, and they understand their issues. Once you break them down to the various kinds of responsibilities that they will probably need to take up. I don't know whether that has been adequate.
That's okay. Yeah.
Good.
If that's okay.
Yeah. And Vivian, did you say at some point that you preferred a certain methodology to another? Or maybe I'm just listening to wild things.
Yeah, I think he has touched on it. She said they use both qualitative and the quantitative approach, but the particular one she is capturing is only the quantitative side. Yeah. Okay,
that's fine. Thanks. Okay, so I guess in terms of the presenter discussant banter, we probably are coming close to some consensus on where things stand. So if there's nothing else to trust between the both of you, there's a question from David Mambari. First of all, he's thanking you and you for that presentation, but he's wondering whether you think from your research that there's any complexity of who, whether there's complexity of who is the owner or distant beholder when it comes to those who you are calling officials or who have power of water supply. Yeah, if you want to respond to that, that would be great.
Yes, thank you so much, David. Yes, yes, there was a complexity in identifying, who is the owner, who is the beholder, and I like the framework by Professor Communal in, demarcating who really is the owner, because what we have seen in a lot of development interventions, once you come into a community, like you come into my community and you say, we want to do a water supply project for everyone, but I might not be really the one suffering from a particular issue. And I like Professor Olonishakin's framework of identifying who is this. Have they been impacted in clear ways? Are they going through it? Have they received interventions? So once those groups of people or individuals meet that criteria, then you're able to delineate and say, okay, this are the owners, and the rest of us become the beholders. Yes, I might be a Kenyan, I might be living in the vicinity, or I might be working around there, but I am not an owner. I do not live through the challenges. So there has been that complexity before, and I believe there's still that complexity, because even within those people who live in the slums, there are those ones who are now cartels. In my visits to the slums, you would see one who is the landlord. He has 20, 30 rows of houses. So, and the challenges the rest are facing are not probably similar to him, because he can buy water, he can, get the processed, purified kind of water. So it's still a quite heterogeneous space. There's still a lot of work to be done in delineating that, and there are still complexities. But at least that framework, those 4 questions have given us a good starting point to address that difference. Thank you.
Excellent. Please keep your questions coming if you have them. I have one question for you, Wanjiru. I've always thought about water supply projects in this case, and all projects that aim to address some kinds of gender biases in society. But I also tend to find a lot of how to say lapses in some of those projects. And so my question to you is that, do you think that there are any elements of the water supply projects that you've been studying that reinforces gender biases or gender stereotypes in society? In other words, the focus on women and their association to water, for instance, and the fact that projects are hoping to make women more comfortable in addressing water related, more comfortable in that space, in itself becomes a problem that reinforces stereotypes. I don't know what you think, whether the question makes sense at all, but do you think that in itself can reinforce gender stereotypes in society?
Yes, I think water is highly gendered, and that is what you find even on the ground. A lot of interventions really target or are centered around women. I think also because of their roles, and as I mentioned in the beginning, the women are the ones who have to look for water in case they have to cook, in case of health issues. In the slum, a lot of the businesses are small businesses. A lot of them are small eateries. So someone making our local chapatis or small snacks, and most of those vendors are women. So in the end, the people who are looking for water are women. So yes, the interventions come in that direction, ride a lot on women and on the capital that they provide. Sometimes, yes, they reinforce that stereotype, because you find men thinking and also assuming that is a women problem, that is a women issue, that those are projects to be run by women. So, and that was quite evident even in the areas, in the kiosks I was visiting. You'll find many of them are run by women, as much as probably there's a man who has been appointed as a lead person there, then of course is a treasurer in the self-help group, but that man is never there. So, because that place needs to be cleaned, it needs to be mopped, so the woman is the more appropriate person to mop and clean, once there's spillages and all that. So at the end of the day, I believe in a way, we reinforce those stereotypes in this kind of work.
And do you think there's opportunity to change some of those trajectories of water supply projects?
I do not want to tie myself to say that it is impossible. I believe it is possible, but I think we need some bit of reorientation. I think we need some bit of reorientation in how do we think about this problem? How do we think about who carries the burden or who should bear the burden of this problem? So we need some bit of reorientation if we are to address those gender sort of problems.
Okay, great. I think that the other comments are more complimentary generally. That speaks to the quality of the presentation and the discussions from the discussant. Meles from Ethiopia is asking it's not a question really, it's just a comment really. I'll just read it out, and if it strikes a response, please do respond. So Meles said, as a discussant rightly mentioned, qualitative methods like focus group discussions, IDI, and participant observations could have helped you to come up with deeper insights into the problem of water management challenges people are facing in the community. Does that strike any response? Like, I'm sure you've said that you use a mixed method, and so these probably have been used anyway. But yeah, if you want to respond, please go ahead.
No, yes, I definitely agree that those methods, especially the FGDs, would have been quite instrumental. How I delivered my survey, it was more of an interview because I had to administer it and translate it, on the go, on the ground. So I sort of used an interview in that way, but I believe focus groups would have been much richer. As I said, it's in the constraints of our university system. For our school, we were not allowed to do that. But such comments, we've got a lot of such comments, and they are now changing. As per my conversations about a few weeks ago, they are now allowing students to go into FGDs, especially from our school. In other social science, the humanities, they were allowing that, but for us, we were more quantitatively oriented. But thank you for such comments. At least they have changed the position of the university now on that.
Okay, great. And there's a question from Eka. I don't think Eka, this question is out of place. So are there any reflections on how these intersect with the expected or absence of role of the government in the origins and sustainability of these projects? Basically looking at where projects come from and what government role are in these projects.
Yes, when I was looking at this study, one of my key variables as the moderator was the role of government in terms of regulatory policy. How do they address these things? And that's where the issues of cartels and the power plays were supposed to be addressed. So as I mentioned, again, the policy is quite weak with respect to the informal settlement space. The regulators have admitted that, it's become a challenge. They're not able to manage those spaces. The policy is not quite specific and explicit on how to manage water supply projects in that space. So that has been quite a challenge. And as of 2019, 2020, the regulator had begun now trying to streamline. They went on a data collection exercise to try and streamline the policy to address those needs, because again, all these issues we're raising, as Vivian rightly mentioned, the social capital and other variables that I studied cannot work without that regulatory sort of angle, because water now is a public good. So there are conversations around that, and at least the regulator has begun taking steps towards addressing the current gaps.
All right. I think there are no more questions coming in, and there's no new question from me. And I note that we've done 1 hour, which is almost what we needed. But I would love either of you or both of you, Wanjiru and Vivian, to give you any final remarks, any additional reflections based on the discussion so far. So probably first to you, Vivian, if there's anything at all you want to say today.
Yeah, just like you were saying, I think I am much interested in the gender side, but of course, we have virtually exhausted the conversation, and I believe we will come back to it next time. Because sometimes when we argue that women are more involved in water and other issues, they are quite debatable. What I have actually realized is that women are more involved in domestic use of water. When we look at the uses of water, we use water for agriculture, we use water for domestic, and also industry. So when you take a critical walk through all these dynamics, you realize that women are just involved in the domestic aspect. And when it comes to switching and directing of water, where power really plays with the supply of water, for example, in agriculture side, where most men invest their money, you realize that men should be more involved in water issues. So, it's maybe we will have another time to discuss this thing, but the narrative around the fact that women are more involved in water and hence they come forth another thing, I think is a gender issue, and it is trying to entrench some stereotypes, which we have to have genuine conversations. We all have to unlearn and maybe discuss those things and get back to form. But the presentation has been very wonderful, absolutely what I expected and more of what I expected. And also the questions have been very reflective, and they have given us so many thoughts to think about when it comes to water management and water governance in Africa and maybe in the world as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vivian.
Very much, yeah.
Wanjiru, any final thoughts?
Thank you very much also to yourself, to Vivian, for the insights and what will come out of this, because I want to keep writing on water governance. And I like her issue of gender. We need to tackle this issue of gender. And yes, in the informal settlements, in the slums, it's quite a different question, because there we don't do agriculture. There the men go out to work in the industry. So the women are the ones left in the slums, and a lot of the businesses around there, they're the ones who are running. So it's a totally different space compared to, the broader space. But still, yes, we need to get our minds off the fact that it is women who should carry this problem. Thank you very much also to the attendees who've raised useful questions, David, Eka, and the gentleman from Ethiopia, sorry, his name, I need to go back. Melissa, yes, I need to look at it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this insight. I believe the papers and the work that shall come out of it will be much better and much stronger going forward. Thank you for the opportunity, also to the ALC. Thank you.
Awesome. So yes, that's Vivian Nsia, who is gender and water governance expert, and obviously her responses and comments have been useful and suggestive of her expertise. Wanjiru, PhD, she has expertise in project sustainability, leadership, knowledge management, and development in Africa, and this presentation speaks to her expertise as well. Wanjiru is also a staff at the African Leadership Center, which is brilliant. So we can't thank you all enough. And just as a reminder, this platform is called the African Leadership Center's Research Seminar Series. It's co-managed by, co-chaired usually by Dr. Eka, Dr. Albert Mbiatem, who has just dropped off, and myself occasionally as well. And please watch out for next month's call, next month's advertisement, and join us again. And thanks everyone for coming. It's been a very wonderful day and presentation and insightful conversations. Do have a good day.